Everyone knows Kendrick Perkins is one of the worst analysts in all of sports, and I would say 80% of his terrible takes in some way reference Michael Jordan. As many of you guys know, Kendrick Perkins is a big LeBron James fan, and to this day, is the GOAT in NBA history. So with that being the case, in today's video, we're going to look at the worst Michael Jordan takes from Kendrick Perkins, debunk them, and expose him to the terrible NBA analyst everyone knows he is.
We have never seen a player that has had this type of pressure and have overachieved for this long period of time. When LeBron James was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at the age of 16, being called the chosen one, that's when the pressure started. Michael Jordan was getting cut off his high school team. Okay. And by the way, you talking about competing for a championship this year? LeBron James is 35. Michael Jordan wasn't competing for a championship at 35.
What did you just say?
Michael Jordan wasn't competing for a championship at 35.
Say it again to my face.
Michael Jordan wasn't competing for a championship at 35.
Come again?
Michael Jordan wasn't competing for a championship at 35.
What you witnessed right there was a guy in Kendrick Perkins who knows absolutely nothing about NBA history. As saying Jordan at 35 wasn't competing for championships is flat out false. As in fact, Jordan at age 35 had one of the best seasons in NBA history, being first team All-NBA, first team All-Defense, winning MVP, the second oldest ever, All-Star Game MVP. His Bulls team, despite Scottie missing 38 games, had the best record in the East. He was the NBA's leading scorer, and in the playoffs averaged 32 points per game. And if you want to go even further, when it came to the NBA Finals in Game 6 in Utah, he had one of the best performances of all time, scoring 45 points, outscoring his entire team, in the fourth quarter, having 16 points, the steal on Malone, and the shot over Russell. So, contrary to what Perkins believes, Michael Jordan, age 35, was still dominant and competing for championships. And the one thing I do want to look at is that Bulls team and how old they were compared to LeBron's team in 2022. Looking at that Bulls squad, Jordan, he was 35 years old, Rodman was 37, Pippen was 32, and Ron Harper was 34. And looking at Jordan's two sidekicks, Rodman in the playoffs, he was actually benched in the conference finals, and Scottie Pippen had a bad back the entire year. Now, looking at LeBron's team this year in 2022, he had Westbrook, Anthony Davis, Carmelo, Dwight Howard. He had a stacked lineup and what some would call a super team. Despite all of that, LeBron's Lakers only won 33 games and missed the play-in tournament. Looking at both those teams, the Lakers had an average age of 32.2, compared to the Bulls, who was 31.7. What I'm trying to show you guys is that Jordan, at age 35, was still dominant and had one of the best years ever, overachieving and winning the championship, compared to LeBron James, who with an aging roster, can't even make the playoffs in the Western Conference.
Now I'm talking to you, Stephen A. and Max, and all of a sudden it's Jordan. So y'all would never give the proper props to the younger generation because y'all are haters. Michael Jordan and LeBron James are sitting at the same dinner table. If Michael Jordan order a ribeye, LeBron James is going to order a ribeye with a bone in. So what you're talking about right now, it doesn't make sense to me. It's no gap. Both of these guys, you could close your eyes and say, just pick one. Their resume is equal, it matches up. You could close your eyes and pick one and you won't be wrong.
Now, Kendrick Perkins right there has some pretty bold claims, saying Jordan and LeBron's resumes, they're basically equal, and you can't go wrong with either one. And even went as far as saying Max and Stephen A. Smith are haters for not believing this. Now, first things first, looking at both Jordan and LeBron's resumes, they're obviously impressive in the top 1% of NBA players. But still, with that being said, there's a massive difference between Jordan and LeBron in overall accolades, as the gap between these two players is 1 MVP, 2 Finals MVPs, 2 championships, 3 All-Defensive teams, 1 Defensive Player of the Year, and 2 three-peats. I mean, look at someone like Dwayne Wade, a top 25 player in NBA history. In D. Wade's career, he had 0 MVPs, 1 Finals MVP, 3 championships, 3 All-Defensive teams, and 0 Defensive Player of the Years. The overall gap in accolades between Jordan and LeBron is arguably better than Dwayne Wade's career, a top 25 player of all time and a surefire Hall of Famer. So, a word of advice for Kendrick Perkins: if you're going to say Jordan and LeBron, they're at the same table, just do one thing for me. Make sure that table is at minimum 25 feet long, as Jordan's resume is still far superior.
His last 2 championships came against Karl Malone, John Stockton, with a great coach and Hornacek on that team. 3 great players and a great coach. 60-win teams. Never went 7 games. You're right. You're right. Oh, Kurt, you're right. LeBron has had to slay the monster. That's something Michael Jordan never had to do because Michael Jordan was the monster. He was the monster.
So you mean to tell me? So you did you just bring up Jeff Hornacek? Did you have the audacity to bring up Jeff Hornacek?
As a third-best player on a team? As the third-best player on a team?
No, come. You know, do you know what LeBron James would have did to Jeff Hornacek and Thunder Dan Marley?
Stockton,
do you know what it would have been?
And Hornacek,
it would have been barbecue chicken and smothered ribs.
Now, that clip right there, I absolutely love, as undoubtedly it exposes Perkins for his lack of NBA knowledge. As looking at those Jazz teams, for a decade stretch, they are a perennial 55-win team that won 60-plus games 3 different times. And looking at 97-98, those 2 Jazz teams won 60-plus games and gave Jordan's Bulls the toughest time in the NBA Finals. And looking at both those Jazz teams, 97-98, here's a competition they beat in the Western Conference. A 61-win Lakers team that had Shaq, Nick Van Exel, Eddie Jones, as well as Kobe, all 4 guys who were all-star players. In 97, they beat the Rockets, who won 57 games. They had Hakeem, Clyde Drexler, as well as Barkley. In 98, we had a Duncan Robinson Spurs team that won 56 games. No matter what Kendrick Perkins says, those Jazz teams were dominant and very nearly won 1 championship, if not 2. And Perkins trying to downplay this Jazz team, saying LeBron would go nuts on Jeff Hornacek, Stockton, and Karl Malone, I find pretty ironic. As LeBron in 2011 was outplayed by a role player in Jason Terry. For the series, averaging 17.8 points per game, 4.0 turnovers, having 4 games of 20 points or less, and 1 game having only 8 points. And for the entire series, LeBron James was MIA in the 4th quarters and a complete no-show. That Dallas Mavericks team had a Hall of Fame point guard, a great shooting guard in Jason Terry, and a Hall of Fame power forward in Dirk Nowitzki. Their overall roster top to bottom was very similar to the 98 Jazz, who also had 2 Hall of Famers and 1 effective shooting guard in Jeff Hornacek. And looking at our next segment, Kendrick Perkins, it asks which player, LeBron or Jordan, had a tougher road to the championships and their overall greatness.
Was more difficult than Michael Jordan.
You damn right I do, and for a number of reasons. Look, it's not just because of the generation in the league being soft. At the end of the day, Michael Jordan didn't have no pressure coming out of North Carolina, high expectations for him being where he got to. And by the way, LeBron James actually had to go through a lot of Hall of Famers to get what he had to get accomplished. We have to remember, he did play in the era with Kobe and Shaq. He did play in the era with Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett. The list goes on. So at the end of the day, look, I'm not taking anything from MJ, but let's not act like what LeBron had to overcome to get where he's at today. Oh, he had, it's not even close.
Now, looking at that quick segment, one thing I do agree with, saying LeBron James had the most pressure, as well as hype, out of any athlete ever. But in terms of which player had a tougher overall road, looking purely at the basketball court, I think it's Jordan pretty easily. As looking at both their careers, LeBron James, for the majority of his career, played in the weak Eastern Conference, which is inferior to the Western Conference. And comparing Jordan versus LeBron James in their overall conferences, LeBron for his career has a 3-5 record versus 60-win teams, compared to Jordan, who's 7-2. Looking at 50-win teams, LeBron James is 11-9, compared to Jordan, who's 20-7. So in both those pivotal categories, Michael Jordan has way more wins, as well as less losses. And if you want to narrow the scope and look at their overall primes, look at Jordan from 88 to 98. During that decade stretch in the Eastern Conference, there were 8 60-win teams and 31 50-win teams. Now looking at LeBron's prime, from 2011 to 2020, there were 5 60-win teams and 24 50-win teams. Whatever way you want to slice it, it's pretty obvious Michael Jordan had a tougher road as well as tougher competition. Now, with that final point being made, that is the end of the video. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.